So how does Moscow explain its actions? With disinformation. It claims that Ukraine is threatening Russia, that Ukraine seeks to provoke a conflict, and that the Russian troop buildup and the tanks and heavy artillery are all purely defensive. That's like the fox saying it had to attack the henhouse because its occupants somehow pose a threat. We've seen this gaslighting before. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014, it claimed that Ukraine was the aggressor to justify pre-planned military action. No one should be surprised if Russia instigates a provocation or incident, then tries to use it to justify military intervention, hoping that by the time the world realizes the ruse, it'll be too late. The idea that Ukraine is the aggressor in this situation is absurd. Moscow is simultaneously driving the false narrative that NATO is threatening Russia, that NATO plans to station military infrastructure in Ukraine to stir conflict with Russia, that NATO swore after the Cold War not to admit countries in Eastern Europe, and that NATO has broken those promises. Each of those claims is false. NATO is a defensive alliance. It exists to protect, not to attack. Let's remember that over the past 2 decades, Russia invaded 2 neighboring countries, Ukraine and Georgia, and maintains troops and munitions in Moldova against the will of the government. It's interfered in elections in many nations, including our own. It's used chemical weapons to try to assassinate opponents of the Russian government, including poisoning Sergei and Yulia Skripal when they were on NATO allied territory in England. It's violated international arms control agreements, pulled back from long-established confidence-building and transparency measures, supported violent dictators, enabled crimes against humanity in places like Syria. Diplomacy is the only responsible way to resolve this crisis. We are fully committed to meaningful, reciprocal dialogue with Russia, just as we're fully committed to consulting and coordinating with our allies and partners, including the European Union, in all our discussions in all formats. We would far prefer a diplomatic path and a diplomatic solution to a crisis that Russia has brought forth. Our goal is to have a relationship with Russia that is predictable and stable, so that we can cooperate when it's in our mutual interest and address our differences with an open and frank dialogue. It'll be very difficult to make actual progress if Russia continues to escalate its military buildup and its inflammatory rhetoric. And we've been clear with Russia about what it will face if it continues on this path, including economic measures that we haven't used before, massive consequences.